I constantly remind myself, like, hey, why are you here in the first place? And it's because we love these animals and we want to be a part of it.
Are you a horse lover with literally anything else on your plate in your life? You're going to love today's episode. With guest Kasey Merced, professional horsewoman, we get into how do you leave regular life behind so that you can have a productive session with your horse, or at the very least, not take it out on them? How do you fill your cup so that you're not miserable and burnt out when you have so many competing demands on your time? Kasey generously shares the doable bite-sized habits that keep her head on straight through the ups and downs of life. And come learn about her amazing inclusive facility that offers lessons to special needs children and adults.
Welcome to the Resilient Reiner, the premier podcast focused on mental performance for equestrians and improved horse show performance. Whether you're a rookie reiner or a seasoned competitor, this show is for riders who want to take their skills to the next level and achieve their full potential in the show ring. I'm Nicole Burnett, and I'm a master mindset coach who's obsessed with helping you achieve all those horse dreams you always thought were impossible. Join me each week to develop a show-ready mindset and gain the competitive edge you need to compete with confidence.
On the podcast today, I am thrilled to welcome Kasey Merced as our guest. Kase is an Alabama native currently settled in southern Tennessee with her husband and her 2 kids. Although she was born in the city and spent the first 10 years of her life in a not-so-great neighborhood, she ended up finding herself in the horse scene when her parents finally found a small farm outside city limits. She took with it and ran. Even as a kid in the city, she always had horses in her heart. It was all she dreamed of, and as an adult, she has trained and competed professionally for over a decade very successfully. Kasey and her husband purchased a commercial indoor arena in 2020, where she currently trains ranch horses, she competes, and she also teaches lessons. Aside from her competitive and general riding programs, she works with special needs children and adults at her facility. Kasey has a huge passion for giving special needs families a place to belong in the horse industry. You're going to love this interview, and I'm so grateful to Kasey for coming on. Oh, perfect. Okay.
Awesome.
Well, good. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This is just,
You're so welcome.
Yeah. And I love doing this too, because I talk a lot about things that, like, whatever I'm going through. So like podcasts where I just give myself a pep talk on whatever I need, or, different things that I'll see people that are either working through. And I love to just bring on guests who can highlight the different aspects of all the stuff related to being in horses. Because it's my soapbox, I guess, but I feel like so much of it is mental, and we just kind of can gloss over.
Absolutely.
And I think that makes it more difficult than it needs to be, And
absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
And
yes, 100%.
Yeah. And so I love being able to bring on people, and I'm just really excited for your perspective of both running a facility and all of the kind of the mental side of that as well. Horses don't feed themselves. Stall cleaners don't, hire themselves. And then
Yes.
and all of just the resilience. I know I've just been really inspired by your story of like, well, horses are a given. And you're like, okay, yes, absolutely. And then, you get all these other things thrown at you with your neck and the blood and all this stuff. And so it's
yes.
all right, how do you just keep going? And so I'm just grateful that you came on to share some of your story, because you might just think, oh, I'm just me, I'm just doing whatever. And it's very inspiring, to
Thank you.
Yeah, because I know the other thing too is that sometimes we think, oh, we'll have such a disconnect from either non-pro to pro, or even just like everyone else versus someone who's $1 million rider. And those people absolutely have so much to share. And I think it can also be so inspiring to just hear from other people, just people who
are like us.
Exactly. Like, and I really don't mean that in an insulting way at all. I mean that it's
no, absolutely. Because I catch myself comparing where I am and what I do, my level of knowledge, my skill set on the back of a horse, to, like you said, these $1 million riders that you see on Instagram, you see on Facebook, in the reels, on TikTok. or you see them in person at these shows. And, we forget that we're looking at a shell. We're looking at the outside.
Yeah.
We're watching the ride. We're watching the warm up, whatever, but that's the shell. And there's so much inside of that we are just clueless about when it comes to, knowing that individual as a person and what they do and what they battle, because everybody, in my opinion, battles something. Yeah. It may be a smaller battle than what you battle, or it may be a bigger one. It may be the same, but everyone is going to battle something. And if you don't believe that, I think you're a fool, because we all go through it. Okay. Whether you ride $1 million coals or you ride $1,500 cell barn grade backyard bred, whatever, we are all human beings at the end, no matter what level of this we are on. And I think we forget about that.
No, we really do. And I think some people might feel a little disheartened, but I feel personally very encouraged when I realize, oh, I'm not a special snowflake. Like, I'm so normal. Oh, it doesn't mean I'm doing it wrong. Like, oh, okay.
Exactly.
Everybody has things. Everybody is dragging themselves out to do this.
People have seen me. I've been very open with my journey from start to where I am now, but there are times I haven't been open. And when I was at the very top and I got my pro sponsorship and I'm like feeling good, I've got names attached to me now and I'm headed to world and everything is so grand. A lot of people didn't know that I was at my lowest during that time mentally. I was so depressed I could barely get out of bed. This is a little embarrassing, but I went a couple weeks at a time without even washing my hair just because I was so just in a funk. But by, the grace of our creator, I still powered through and I still had that end goal that I wanted to accomplish, which was get to world. And I still made it happen. But oh my gosh, that was the hardest battle. One of the hardest battles I've ever fought in my life was to get up and keep going. And they just saw the shell. They just saw this, this girl that's just happy-go-lucky. She just went pro. She's got these big names attached to her now. She's getting recognition and all that good stuff. They had no idea I was dying on the inside, literally. Like, it was everything I could do to keep myself going just to get out of bed every day.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, when you're going through something like that, I mean, we're just getting right into it, but were there any things that particularly helped you? Because I can really relate to that experience of like getting out of bed is like, you're like, no, that's a big deal, guys. Like we're not going to undersell it. What, in that time, like what kind of helped you to just literally get out of bed in those times?
I think what motivated me in a bigger way, I feel like it's a scale of your motivation and your self-determination and then your core mental health. It's up here, it's a scale. And so what I did is I sat down and I wrote out things that I could do to pour into myself to make it go from this to this. So I started making it a goal to get up out of bed at a certain time every morning, make breakfast for the kiddos at a certain time, clean up the house a little bit at a certain time. And then I blocked off like 4 hours of nothing but barn time where I could go down there, I could take my time, not rush my mare, not rush myself, and literally pour into myself in those 4 hours so that the next morning when I got up, my cup would be just a little bit more full and I would have a little bit more to work with that next day. And it was just like a slow little step by step where I was finally getting it from, being like this to going like this, on that scale. And so that's kind of how I was able to do it. But I didn't do it alone. My husband has always been extremely supportive of my not so great mental health journey. So he would always make sure, babe, are you on schedule? Hey, it's almost barn time. You need to get ready to get down there. Like, he was so good about pushing me and making me stay on schedule so that I did have that blocked off time period in that day to pour into myself and to help me reach the goal, which was to get my mare ready for, the world show at the end of the year. So yeah, in my opinion, it is a scale and it's never going to be, like this all the time. There's going to be a lot of this too. So you really have to find ways that you can pour into yourself to get that scale tipped a little bit.
Oh, I just love how you describe that of just consciously making a choice to pour into yourself. I'm going to borrow that description because it's so true that without using those words, I absolutely relate to that feeling of you're like, I need to go out to the barn and I'm going to come back and I'm going to be a little better. Like it's going to, I'm going to be a little closer. I'm going to be a little calmer. Like all my problems are going to
I have never came back from the barn and was in a bad mood or felt worse than I did when I went down there. Like you always come back. Us horsewomen, it's almost a surge of endorphins when you're down there. So when you do come back to the house, you have a little bit more to work with. So that next day, you're feeling just a smidge better, whether you realize it or not, just because you took that time to pour into yourself.
Yeah. And I love like breaking that down into little small goals because I think it's so human to just want to make everything all better all at once in a grand dramatic fashion instead of being like, oh man, like my kitchen's a mess. I need to spend 8 hours cleaning it because it's so gross instead of being like, I'm going to clean like one cabinet face today.
That is exactly what I do.
And then tomorrow that is going to be cleaner and I'll clean a different cabinet face. And it's amazing how difficult it can be to just embrace that and actually do it because you absolutely move yourself forward and you start getting like positive momentum. You start feeling better and you are making real changes, but it can be so hard to not beat yourself up along the way. And so I love that.
Yeah. Like you said, breaking it down to small goals throughout the day. I still do that every day, even when I am at a much more brighter space in my life with my mental health. I still have to write things down. And in my opinion, once you start getting to the point where you do feel better and you are making time for the important things for you, not for the kids, not for the husband, not for the housewife, not, for you as a person, you have to remember to hold yourself accountable. So personal accountability for me is continuing to make that list every day to make sure that I don't fall off the wagon. So I think a lot of us, we kind of fall back eventually. We get up, we're good, things are going good. And then I'm sure you've experienced too, we fall off the wagon and then it's like shit just hits the fan and implodes all over again. And we're back at the bottom having to start from scratch.
Oh my gosh.
So that's happened to me so many times and I guarantee you it'll still happen to me eventually. Oh. But something I've learned is personal accountability. And you can't look for anyone else to hold you accountable for your own happiness. It's no one's responsibility but yours. So you have to do your due diligence to hold yourself accountable, even in those good times. So for me, it's still getting up and making that list every day and saying, okay, I'm going to do a little bit of this for this amount of time, a little bit of that for that amount of time. The kids and I, we're going to go here for 2 hours. And then the next 4-hour block is for me.
Yeah.
And I think that has been a game changer for me is having that self-awareness now. Because aside from accountability, if you don't have self-awareness, you can't be accountable.
Yeah.
So you have to find that self-awareness within yourself. I've thought I've had self-awareness. Okay. Like I was like, oh yeah, I got this. Okay. And then I did not. I absolutely did not. So in the last probably 6 months, I've been battling my health issues really bad in the last year. Well, in the last 6 months, I've just been reading a lot of self-help and just following a lot of content creators that talk about this kind of stuff and really, truly trying to find it in myself to be more aware of me, be aware of my emotions, be aware of the way I am perceived, just the way me as a whole. And when I found that self-awareness, I was able to really dig deep and find self-accountability. I'm a strong believer if you don't have self-awareness, you're not going to be successful in holding yourself accountable, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you don't have an idea of what's going on, you can't go anywhere from there.
Exactly. Exactly. You're not setting yourself up for long-term happiness.
Yeah.
And you're not setting yourself up to keep your cup full if you don't have that.
And I love how you're talking about making these things a habit, that it's not something that you do. It's not like, calling the paramedics to come rescue you and then you go back to whatever it was before. It's like, it's really about incorporating it into your life on a daily basis and finding these. I feel like calling them like micro habits or something like that does it a disservice because it's such a cornerstone of everything, of just like, okay, I'm going to write down my list of here's what I'm doing. Here's kind of my time blocks for the day. And I love how you talk into just like sharing that with the people who love you, who can support you and be like, hey, are you getting a little lost in what you told me you wanted to do?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Just keep it going every single day. Oh my goodness. I know that it's not the same, but I was in about, what was it, February-ish? There was kind of a month where we just got like all really sick. I just really related to everything you were saying because we're going through, like, I was feeling, really good because I was like, man, we got through like Christmas. We're getting through the winter. Nobody's getting really sick. Everything's going good. And then like everybody got sick in February. And so there's 5 of us. It's kind of like by the time it rolls through everybody, and then everybody's a little bit like their immune system's a little stressed, and then they get like sick with something else. And you're like, I have not been doing my routines. Like, I mean, there's a certain element of like trying to survive.
It throws everything off.
Yeah.
You go back into survival mode.
Yeah, you're in survival mode and you're like, this is so much harder. And you're like, I'm not doing my walks, my journaling, all these things that you're like, oh yeah, that really is keeping the ship on track, and trying to come back out of it is like, you're like, oh, sometimes I'll talk about it in the sense that it can be hard that we don't have enough imagination, because it's like when you're doing well, it's hard to imagine that things are going to go poorly. It's hard to imagine, like, how much does it really matter if I skip my, 10 minutes of sunshine? And then when you're like not feeling well, you think, oh my gosh, like, how am I ever going to feel better? And so it's just
exactly
like, anyway, so that kind of thing really always grounds me in
exactly. I call that self-sabotage. That's what I call it. It's like I allow myself to make things so much bigger than what they truly are. And that's sabotaging, you're like, you're literally being your own bully in a sense. You're like, that's too much. I can't do that. I'll never be able to do that again. Well, why? Why can't you do that? Why can't you do that ever again? And it's just really a mental game. And when we fall into that, we literally self-sabotage as our own bully. That's how I feel about that. And it goes back to trying to find that self-awareness where you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I need to take a step back because I'm messing myself up here. And I still find myself doing that quite often. I think self-sabotaging almost is probably a trauma response for me, just because of the things that I've done and the things that I've went through, earlier in my life. So I do catch myself doing that as well. So I know exactly what you mean when you say that and how it feels.
Yeah. Oh man. So yeah, so Kasey is just, gosh, you're just spitting truth left and right here. I'm just like, I'm gonna call you later because we can keep talking. Like, you get it.
Yeah.
Oh, but no, because it's all of that, of like setting up those little habits, just of like, what am I gonna do today? What's like my tiny little commitment that I'm gonna make to myself? And
what is gonna be my little victory today?
Yeah. Because when you do that, it's that self-awareness. You bring that self-awareness of, I had a win today. Here's what I said I was going to do, and I did. It's a little bit better. And if you're being your own bully, being aware to stop that, like being aware of your self-talk, but being curious in a loving way of, what am I doing right now? Like, what am I doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, and not being the type of person that beats yourself up. You have to allow yourself grace. And you have to be able to find it within you to forgive yourself when you're not at your best, when you feel like you should be. And sometimes you need to be, but you fall short. You have to be able to forgive yourself. And that's something that I have kind of realized in the last 6 months as well, is that self forgiveness. And that is just as important, in my opinion, as self awareness. There's been so many times where I felt so guilty for snapping at Hunter and Coco, or just not being the type of person I strive to be. And I've caught myself still feeling bad even after I've went and apologized to my kids. Hey guys, mommy's just having a bad day. I'm sorry I yelled at you. I'm just having a bad day. I'm not mad at you. I'm sorry. But then going into my bedroom and crying because I feel like a piece of shit, for yelling at my kids when they didn't deserve it. So you have to, in those moments as well, not just in the barn, but in the household too, you have to figure out how you can forgive yourself for not being the best version of yourself, even in the times where you should be. It's still okay to fall short, and don't hold that against yourself.
Well, tell me about that, because I think we all can relate to that feeling of life outside the barn, and then you got to go and try and interact with your horse. It doesn't matter if you're just trying to catch them and they're like, I don't know, you seem like you're not all there today. Maybe not. Or you're trying to ride them. And so what do you do? Is there anything that you found that's helpful to you when you're kind of doing that transition from life outside the barn to being with your horse and in a way that you can actually be present with them in order to have a productive session? And I don't even just mean productive like training. I just mean not like be a jerk to your horse either,
Exactly. And we've all fallen short in that aspect too. We've all had bad days and went out there and saddled up that horse and was a little too hard on them, schooled them a little too hard, just because we're so bound up on the inside. So, we kind of project that onto our horses at times. And I think everyone is guilty of that at some point. For me personally, when I'm having a rough day or I'm not being the best me and I'm just in a bad mood, but I still have to go down there. I still have to, get those horses up and in school for either a show or for one of the programs that we run, or even a training horse. For me, what I've started doing that I found was really helpful is the moment I walk off my front porch, it's a clean slate. And I actually verbalize that out loud. And when I tell myself out loud, it's like I can visualize a clean slate, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
I walk up my porch and I'm like, okay, clean slate, let the BS go, just ground yourself. We're going to have a good ride. I literally tell myself that as I walk from my porch down to the arena. And sometimes I'll tell myself over and over, I'll repeat it. And I know this sounds crazy and probably like the woo woo, like, girl, you're weird. Okay. And I am a little weird. I'm a little weird. Matt will tell you I'm a little weird. But yeah, so really, it's not as hard as you would think it would be. And I think people get caught up in thinking that being able to make that transition or change your mindset is just, all this self work. And it doesn't have to be. It goes back into self sabotaging. It really goes back to self sabotaging and realizing that, hey, it does not have to be that hard. Cut the shit, get it together right then and there. Tell yourself this is a clean slate and I don't have to feel this way anymore. And when I go down to that barn, I'm going to have one of the best rides that I've ever had. And even if you don't have the best ride you've ever had, you're still having a good time. Okay. So you're still letting that horse do its thing, which is give them endorphins, because you need it more than ever at that point, especially if you're going down there and you're going into it with a not so great energy, So you can, in my opinion, you can really just simplify this. It's not that hard. And I know some people may hear this and they're like, Kasey, girl, that's not a cool way to go about, trying to tell somebody that things are going to be okay. But let me tell you, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to minimize anyone's mental battles. But what I am trying to do is tell you that if you will just stop, ground yourself for a second, and tell yourself, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this hard. I can start from a clean slate in this moment and shift my energy into the direction I want it to go. And like I said, that probably sounds like woo-woo, weirdo case, but for someone who has been so far down in the dumps to the point where, I was suicidal, to where I am now, I'm telling you that it really is that simple. It is that simple. But it goes back to being able to find the self-awareness to make it that simple for you. And also, this kind of goes into that transition that you asked me about. You may be having family issues in the home, or you may be having issues with anything that's bringing you stress. I have learned to tell myself, okay, the energy that person or that situation is, the energy that's being projected at me, I don't have to absorb it. It's a choice to allow that type of energy to fall onto you. So I've been really learning to allow people to, I call it waller, to just waller in themselves and waller in whatever BS that they are trying to throw at me, to leave them where they are so that I can protect my own self. So when I do step off that front porch and I head to the arena, I'm like, see y'all later. Y'all ain't killing the vibe. Okay. Clean slate from here. I'm going out here. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to enjoy myself. And this is going to be a good afternoon for me. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. It's reminding me a little bit of something I was thinking of too. It's just that, like, saying where it's basically like when something isn't going your way, like just stop digging, right? Stop digging the hole. And that's kind of what you're saying. You're like, if things aren't going well, we don't have to lean into making it worse.
Right. Yes.
We're like,
don't waller
stop
in
digging.
it.
Like,
yeah. Do not waller in it. Get yourself up, dust it off, clean slate, shift your focus. Even if it's shifting your focus to something small or whatever it takes to be able to get you out of that stagnant mentality.
Yeah.
You've got to learn how to do it. And that self-awareness is one of the first things that I think will truly help you not only be able to get yourself out of that hole, but keep yourself out of that hole.
Yeah, no, I think that it's both easy and not easy all at the same time because you have to be
it's just like a horse I have. His name is Ace. We call him Doughboy because he's just a big tubby thing. But he is the easiest, most hardest horse to ride. That does remind me a lot of what we're talking about here. That's what we call him, the easiest, hardest horse to ride. But once you master him, you got it. It's smooth sailing. That's what we tell these guys when they are paired with this horse. Once you master this horse, guys, it's smooth sailing. Same thing with your mindset. Once you master the easiest yet hardest thing ever, girl, it's smooth sailing. You got it. You have those tools now. Even if they're put back in your toolbox, they are there. So you can pull them out and use them to keep yourself where you need to be. So, yeah. It just reminded me of Ace, our doughboy.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, let me ask you a little bit about kind of running your facility.
So I own Allegiance Arena here in Fayetteville, Tennessee, and we do a little bit of everything here. We train, we compete, we coach, the whole shebang. But we also have a special needs program. So we work with special needs families here. And that is where my heart is. I absolutely love our special families because they're all each so unique and they bring something different to the table every time they come. But yeah, so as far as training, my specialty is Western pleasure horses and ranch show horses. So that's what I compete in. That's what I train in. And we do a little bit of everything, even arena rentals here at the place. It's a commercial arena, so it's pretty big. We can do just about anything and everything in it.
Well, so how was it shifting from, even if you have a facility when it's your own personal place or boarding different places, and then shifting into running a professional facility like that? What sort of differences did you notice?
So I'll tell you, my husband and I, we bought this commercial arena. It was just the indoor and the land it sat on.
Yeah.
But up until then, we lived on my family farm, and I trained my personal horses, my show horses, in my front yard. I didn't even have an arena. I had nowhere to ride them or train them outside of the pasture, the fence, area in the front yard. So going from that to bam, commercial arena, like your dream come true, open a business, it was crazy at first. And Matt and I learned so much by trial and error, a lot more error in the beginning. It was something. But I decided, I was like, you know what? Aside from training and working my personal show horses, I want to try to get into teaching. I feel like I would do really well with children because I've always loved kids and have always, like I'm Aunt KK to everybody, even people that I'm not even related to. Like I said, we learned a lot by trial and error, and it really showed me just how much opportunity is out there. Even when you think you have no opportunities or you have no resources, you just aren't looking in the right spot, is what it comes down to. But it was a big shift for both of us financially, mentally, the way we had to divide our time up, because I went from riding right there in my front yard and being close to the kids, being able to do everything I needed to do and still ride right there in my front yard, to having this facility and having to relearn how to do time management, still make time to be a present mother. He had to make time to be a present dad and still run this facility. And it was really hard for a while. We opened it in January 2021, and I ran it the full year. And when I opened the program, it started off a little slow. I had like 4 or 5 students. And then it went from 4 or 5 students to, I think it was like 50 a week.
Man.
And so it was very successful. But I didn't realize that I was focusing on the wrong thing. I wanted to be the biggest facility in our area. I wanted to be the one that, was known for producing awesome riders, being inclusive to differently abled people. Like I had this big goal of, all the success, but I realized that I was focusing too much on the success. And in that time period there, I kind of started like losing myself because I was working so hard and so much that I just was overwhelmed and I was losing my vision. I just wasn't there anymore because it was just so hard to keep up with. And in the same time, aside from that, we were trying to compete, trying to train a little on the side and still be wife and mom. And it was just so much. And my cup ran empty very quickly, very quickly. So that first year of business really opened my eyes to how hard it is, first and foremost. Running a business, especially a large one, is very hard. But it also kind of opened my eyes to learning how to shift my focus and what my idea of success is. Everyone has their own vision of what success looks like, and it's going to be different to every person. And in my head, when I first started, I wanted this big, grand, I wanted to be known. I wanted people to know my arena's name, know what we did. I wanted to be the biggest and the best. And I will say we absolutely were. And it was great until it wasn't, because in that time I ran my cup dry and I kind of went back into that hole that we talked about earlier. So I had to figure out how to pull myself back out. And it took a long time to do that. But once I pulled myself back out, I was able to kind of find it in me to take a step back and shift my idea of what my personal success looked like to me. So when I did start again after the flood and all of that good stuff, when I did start my business again, I did so with a clean slate and a completely different vision of what my personal success looked like. And because of that, I've been way happier. Now, I've had some not so great moments, we all do, but I've been in business now longer than I was the first time. And I am in my groove, I finally feel like I figured some really important things out within myself, which in turn has set me up to be a better businesswoman. So, but yeah, to answer your question, it was hard. It was very hard to make that transition from riding, horses in my front yard to running a business and knowing absolutely nothing about running a business. There was some things that we tried in the beginning that were a total bust. And there were things that we tried that, were awesome and worked. But yeah, it was difficult. It's still difficult sometimes, but when you have it in you to want to keep going and want to keep pushing and want to keep trying, I think that it sets you up in the long run to be able to do the things that you thought you probably couldn't do.
Oh, I love that. I really want to highlight your point about like honing in on what success is for you personally.
Yes.
Because that is something that I think so many people struggle with, or they kind of miss, or they'll be going along and they'll think they want something. And it's totally fine to, think you want something, but you work and you work and you work towards it. And then you kind of realize it's not quite what you actually want.
Exactly.
I really want to commend your courage to pivot, because that is so hard for people to realize, well, I don't want it to look like this. I want it to look like this, or I don't want to be a part of this program. I want to do it a different way. And because especially, it's hard enough if you're thinking, oh, I don't want to be a part of this program. I just want to switch barns. When we're talking about kind of your own life and you're like, well, I really want it to look different. You're, in the best way, making it up as you go along. And so it's
exactly, that's exactly what you're doing.
Like, be like, I'm going to trust in myself. I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to make up this thing that I don't have a manual for. And I think that's really just
something that I still have with me, that I've had with me for about almost 20 years now. Mm-hmm. I had a mentor, and his name was Danny Lee. And when we moved out of the city, when I was 10 years old and my dad bought a farm in the county, he was looking for me and my sister a kid safe horse. Mm-hmm. We knew nothing about horses. We were city kids. And my dad went to a feed store and met this guy, Danny, and he was like, well, actually I have a 2-year-old. And, looking back now, a 2-year-old and beginner kids, like, what the hell, Anyways, my dad bought this horse, and she was absolutely everything that he said she was. She was the best horse. We had her for years and years and years until she, was old and gray. But anyways, long story short, he kind of mentored me. We became great friends, and he mentored me along the way over the years. And he told me something when I was about 15. I was really struggling with my horse, Tinkerbell, my Palomino that I've had forever since I was a kid, that I showed for years and years. She was about 3 years old at the time, and I was at a show and I could not get her to collect up. And I was doing what I knew to try to get this mare to collect up, on that right lead departure, because I needed those points for that year-end buckle. And at this point, I was in tears. She was in heat and just being awful at the show. And I was doing what I knew for my knowledge base at the time, and it just wasn't working. I was so angry. I was crying. I went back to the horse trailer and I was crying. I was like, can't get her to do it. I've tried everything. And then he got on her and he rode her around and everything. And he showed me a little bit different way about getting his horse to lope off collected. He did it. She loped off, picture perfect, collected. I mean, everything she needed to be. I was like, what the hell in my head? And he rode her back over to me and he got off and he handed me the reins and he said, here's the thing, Kase. You've got to be able to adjust and adapt. He said, you're fixating on one single thing. What's not working. You've tried it a million times. It's not working for you. It's not working for her. So let it go. Adjust and adapt to what does work, even if it's different. And I took that with me outside of horses as well. So when I find myself kind of in a funk or in a situation with the business where, something's not working right for us or horses or whatever, I go back into that, self-awareness there. And I'm like, okay, well, I know this is not working and I know this is starting to affect my emotions. What the hell do I need to do? Because I'm stuck. I'm stuck. And it goes back to, okay, I need to adjust and adapt because if it's not working, I need to go over here and try something else. Even if it, like you said earlier, even if it looks different or it is a different way, as long as it works like it's supposed to. It doesn't have to look like every other way that should have had it working, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? As long as it still gets the job done. It can look different. It can be different. So you have to be able to adjust and adapt to whatever situation you find yourself in. And I don't mean just on the back of a horse, I mean in life in general.
Yeah.
So that's something that, I really preach even to my kids. Hey, if it's not working, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. There's a million other ways we can do this. We just have to, figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's something that's really stuck with me. And I think a lot of people forget, or maybe they've never even been told that, it doesn't have to look a certain way. It can still get the job done, even if it is different than what you have in your head, that it should look like.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because the horse doesn't read the manual. They just.
Nope. Absolutely not.
You're talking about that. And I'm thinking of my little horse who's, was doing fine. And then all of a sudden, just wouldn't do a right lead. And you're like, well, they didn't read the manual. We have to adapt. We have to figure out what, what's going on.
You have to adapt to that situation so that you're right there mentally with it, so that you do have the tools to adjust it to where it needs to be or where it needs to go or, what needs to happen. And that is something, outside of horses you can use, but it's really important to use that mindset when you are on the back of a horse, especially a colt. Like you just said, you got one that she's being a little squirrely, not quite wanting to do what she should know how to do. I'm kind of going through that with the colt of mine, but you just have to really stop. And like you said, your horse doesn't read the manual. So you've got to be the one to take that initiative to figure things out.
Well, tell me a little bit I want to hear about when you work with your special families that come. Do you have to manage yourself more when you're managing the safety of horse and riders and big emotions from these kids or there's a lot going on?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
yes, it's very chaotic. Yeah, it can be a lot. With our special families, I'm a very on top of it trainer and coach with all of my students with everything outside of the special needs program. I'm very boss lady, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But with our special needs families, I have to completely switch, turn on a whole different personality.
Yeah.
So you have to be very upbeat with these children and adults, but you have to almost micromanage everything you do. And your help also has to micromanage everything that they do to ensure that, you can get through this session safely, but also get the most out of it that you can. So we aren't a therapeutic facility because I'm not a therapist in any way. My horses are not, therapy horses. What we are is an inclusive facility.
Mm-hmm.
So when we work with our clients, what we do is we do the absolute most that we can for that individual's needs, just as we would a regular student. We teach them, even if it's hand over hand. A lot of our autistic kiddos are hand over hand. And what that means is literal hand over hand, holding a brush together, brushing, things like that. So we really focus on the sensory aspect of it. So touching the animal as much as possible, brushing, feeling the sensation of the hair, the mane, the whiskers, things like that. And then if we can get the child or the adult in the saddle, then, I usually have at minimum 2 people per individual. And what we do is, we'll have them on the side and we do everything we can to keep it normalized when they're in the saddle seat, so we let them hold the reins and eventually we try to teach them how to steer and things like that. And I think the parents that come here really appreciate that aspect because while we are aware and we work efficiently with their children to meet their needs, we still treat them just like we do all the other students. As where the other students, they come in, they can hold a brush, they can brush that horse, they can saddle that horse, they can get on and rein that horse. So they start at a higher level, and that's how we look at it, is our special students, they just have to start, at a little bit lower level, which is learning how to do the most simple things. I don't want to, name any names or anything like that, but I have one student and she started with me when she was 4 and she is on the spectrum. She is 5.5 now. So she's been with me for over a year. She was not verbal when she started with me and it was very hand over hand. It was a lot of meltdowns, a lot of fixations on the arena dirt or something that, she saw some way. Like it was hard. Okay. It was hard. But I slowly started incorporating just the normal tasks that I would teach any other neurotypical child, little by little. And it's taken me almost a year and a half. But this little girl is a completely independent rider now. She rides by herself. And yesterday she was here and she ended up bumping up to a trot, an independent trot. And this child was nonverbal and she struggled. She really struggled when she started with me. And I struggled. I was like, am I going to be able to do this? So she's one of my biggest successes and something I'm most proud of in my special program.
Oh, yeah, that is.
Don't get me wrong. I'm so proud of all of my kiddos that come. But this little girl has had it in her from the beginning. Her autism did make it a little hard for her to express her desire to be able to do this kind of stuff with these animals. But she was able to overcome it. It took a year and a half almost, but we stayed committed. Every single week we stayed committed. And now she's just flourishing. And so that's part of why my special program is just something that I'm just so passionate about and I'm so proud of. We have a lot of success with all of our other students and programs here, but that one is just awesome. It's so awesome. And I think our approach of taking these kiddos and these individuals and allowing them to be, and I don't like to use the word normal. I think it's dismissive, but allowing them to do the regular things that everybody else does, they may be differently abled, but they're still capable.
Yeah.
And a lot of people dismiss them and their abilities because they're differently abled. But I've worked with so many over the last couple years, so many kids, teens and adults, that I see through it, if that makes sense. I can see through what makes them differently abled, and we are able to bring their true self out on the back of a horse. I mean, I've had one teenager, he was completely nonverbal. He stammered constantly, and he was very hand over hand. And within about probably 4 or 5 months of him coming weekly, he went from being nonverbal to being able to say his horse's name. And the first time he ever did that, his mom and dad were there, and they just bawled their eyes out. And, I'm going to cry too. If you're crying in front of me for something that amazing, I'm going to cry too.
Oh.
So, he said that horse's name and we all just stopped and we're just in shock because this child, his diagnosis, they told them that he would never, so he had one of those little iPads and he could push buttons that would talk for him. So he truly could not speak when he started with us. But by the time he finished his program, he was speaking.
Wow.
He may have only spoke, at the barn to us and the horses. I don't know if he, spoke as much at home, but he spoke. And that's why I think it's so important to not put people in a box, even when they're differently abled, because I've seen firsthand that doing this kind of stuff can work miracles for these people and these children. And that's why it's really important to me.
That's just amazing. That's so incredible. That's wonderful. And it does. It speaks to the power of just that consistency and not boxing somebody in and saying they can't do it. It might look a little different,
Absolutely.
it might take a little longer, but just continuing to
It goes
persist is
absolutely. It
cool.
goes back to being able to adjust and adapt.
Yeah.
Like everything in life is connected. And so being able to adjust and adapt to meet that individual's needs so that you can figure out what it takes to allow them to learn and allow them to do something. So, yeah, I'm just really big on not putting people in a box because I've seen firsthand that, I mean, these children and adults and these teens, they are so much more than a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is so neat. And I think that is really a really cool thing to just be able to support these people in a way that is encouraging their capabilities.
Yeah.
Like it's not a bad thing to be not a therapy program, but just to be an inclusive program to say,
yeah, I want to
come,
give people a space.
you can take a lesson and then whatever that looks like for where you're at is just what it looks like for where you're at.
Yep. That's exactly how we promote that particular program. We're not therapists. Our horses aren't therapy horses, but they are phenomenal. And I will argue this till I die that you will probably never find a more broke horse than the one that we use mostly for our special families.
Yeah.
He's phenomenal. But yeah, just being inclusive and saying, you know what, you're welcome here. It may look a little different for you, but you're welcome here. You have a place here because, I'm a parent myself to a child with autism. And I've seen firsthand how there's just not a lot of stuff. When he was little, we really tried to get him out and about and, into the programs that he needed, but they were all based around his diagnosis. And we couldn't really find anything for him to be able to enjoy, just like a little boy, So that's why I'm very adamant about being inclusive here, is because I want to give families just a regular place to go where they feel like they belong and they feel welcomed. So that's something that we really strive to do here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that is so powerful. It's so cool. I really it's really cool to hear about. That's really awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, and I think it's encouraging too, just to any people who are listening or people who either have children who might, benefit from this, or if someone is looking to grow their own program, just that, like you were talking about with opportunity, it doesn't always look like what you think, right? It doesn't always have to
Absolutely.
come in the form of a specific therapy program, or that there might be a community that you don't know needs to be served in this way.
Yes, absolutely.
So that is way cool. Well, okay. I guess this is awesome. I'm serious. I might just have to call you later and just, be like, I need to
Absolutely. I'm down for it anytime.
I feel like I've made a friend today. I'm good.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Cause oh man, I always feel like there's always so much we could talk about. But is there anything else that you really would love to share today or?
Well, I think that the takeaway is just finding, that, like we talked about earlier, that self-awareness so that you can keep yourself accountable. I think that that's probably one of the most important things that people should know about and should hear about and should see. And I feel like that's probably one of the least things that we see, especially on social media.
Yeah.
For me, transparency is everything,
Yeah.
especially as a woman that does have, I wouldn't say a large following on social media, but I got a decent one. So just being transparent about what things look like for me is really important because I have had some pretty bad struggles and sometimes I still struggle. And I think it's important for other women to see that and to say, hey, I'm not alone. If that girl over there that looks perfect on social media, if she's saying, damn, it's hard out here, then I don't feel so bad. So I just think transparency is super important when it comes to social media. I know you and I met through Instagram.
Yeah.
So you kind of have followed me for a while and kind of know what I'm talking about when I say transparency. I don't put all my business out there, obviously, but I'm not afraid for people to see me struggle because they're also going to see me come up from that struggle. And I think that the transition from the struggle to the come up is the most important part of when you're actually putting yourself out there on social media and you're showing people, the struggle. I think the transition from the struggle to the come up is probably the most important for people to see because when they do, they're going to see that it's possible.
Yeah.
If that girl's coming up, well, hell, why can't I?
I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's important. It's a form of encouragement, in my opinion. I joke a lot about that I overshare. I'm an oversharer. But I don't necessarily think it's oversharing. I think it's just, like I said, a form of encouragement for others. And that's kind of a weird thing. Like, how could you find encouragement when you're seeing someone struggle? But you're able to see that person for who they are and what they are going through and not what they actually present themselves as on social media and the perfect pictures or the perfect reels or whatever. So I feel like it's just really important to allow people to see the good, the bad, and the ugly so that they know that they're not alone and that they can come up from it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like I know I've been encouraged today. Like I'm
well,
ready
good. That makes me happy.
I'm ready to go do my hair and afterwards and then write out my list. So it's because my version has just been like I've started making like little like I'll give myself 1 minute goals is kind of my version where I'll think about it and I'll be like, because I was like, okay, I need something that I can do even on days like when I don't feel good, even on days when I want to like not do it. I was like, how can I make this so small that I can't help but win, right? And so for me, like, I came up with like 1 minute goals. Like I'm gonna meditate for 1 minute. I was like, I can be laying in bed and like just set a 1 minute timer. Like I could do that for 1 minute, or like or even like I'm gonna
So,
do something.
it's funny that you mentioned that because when my son was when he first got his diagnosis, he was 22 months old and we started therapy almost immediately. He went to the Autism Learning Center in Columbus, Georgia, and that place is phenomenal, but they required parent training.
Okay.
So you had to go in there and learn, how to parent your child because your child has to be parented differently when they're especially that young. And they taught me the timer method. Which is just what you said.
Oh, really?
Start off with a 60-second goal. And so,
cool.
I've taken that and I still use it from time to time. If I don't have a chance to write it down, I'll set a timer on my phone, So that's not something that's just, a weird little thing that you do. that's actually like a legit thing that they use in therapy programs.
Oh, I love
so that that's pretty cool that you mentioned that, because it just brought that memory up. When we first started timer training, we sat down and we did 60-second goals with a timer with Hunter, and it worked. It was great.
Yeah. I
For
pull it
him
out for
and me.
myself all the time.
hmm
Yeah,
it's awesome. Whatever works, man.
Yeah,
If it works for you, it doesn't matter what it looks like to somebody else.
Because you're like, I need to get out of my own way. And so sometimes that's
Yes.
like, I need to imagine that the hurdle that I'm jumping is like ridiculously tiny, because then it's the difference about taking a step forward or just staying stuck.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it so much. And
you're so welcome. I probably talked your head off. I could keep talking.
I love this. This is like my thing where
I
you're
could
like,
just keep on going.
yeah, I'm like getting on the horse. That part is fine. Like I love being on the horse. I love figuring out different, like, do this with my legs, do this with my hands. It's like that part's great. It's the part where my brain is like, they're spinning better than you. Their truck is prettier. Why?
Yeah, they got it.
Like that's
they
the
have
stuff that
a
gets
better
in my
rig
way.
than you. Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally get that. Yes, the comparison, comparison really is like a thief of joy.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. It really truly is. And I never really understood that until I really got hot and heavy into the horse industry and riding and competing on a professional level.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I learned real quick to stop comparing myself to people.
Yeah.
Because it takes away from you and what you're doing.
Yep.
Just go ride your horse. Get back to what was important when you first started riding, which was just riding.
Yeah.
Just loving that horse and having fun and getting out there and doing whatever the hell you wanted to do with it, and not worried about, a buckle or a check.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has just been my pleasure. And I am just,
You're so welcome.
so thrilled.
I love it. Anytime. And if you want to do it again, I'm here.
Okay. Well, good.
I'm
well,
always
I think
down.
we might. We're going to have to do it again. Thank you so much. This was just totally my pleasure. And I'm sure appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Anytime. I'm always here if you want to do it again.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks, Kase.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
I am so excited about Resilient Rainer Academy because I get so many questions about confidence as a rider. This is one of the biggest blocks I see that riders run into that is blocking them from leveling up and really unlocking their true potential in the saddle. So, because I want to give you guys as much as I can, I have been creating this amazing course that I am going to drop in the next month here. If you're interested, I'm putting up a wait list, resilientraineracademy.com. You can get on the wait list. I am just so excited to give this to you guys. I can't wait to see the improvement and the amazing impacts it's going to have for you and your horses.